In this video I will work with some dies and stamps from the CarlaCreates by VaessenCreative Bloom and Zoom collection and will inspire you to combine them and use them in a different way than what you're used to. Hello, it's CisVolk! Time to enjoy card making with me! In today's video we are diving into this fun drip die with matching small drips and this cute heart hole punch die. It creates little holes that look like the bee has been flying around, which gives such a playful effect. I'm also using the wobbler dies again. These come with the garden die set and add a fun interactive element to your card. For the first card I'm stamping and coloring this adorable bee with matching texts to bring the design together. And for the second card things get a bit more playful, using the large poop stamp that I will change into a cream stamp, together with the fun fly and the matching poop die in a creative way. I will also be using the beautiful flower stencil again. And the text stamps with those fun Dutch word puns. So let's get started! Here I have an A6 piece of 200 gram smooth white watercolor paper by Florence, and I'm going to add some color using distress oxide in the color fossilized amber. For applying the ink I use a blending brush. I start blending quite heavily. This yellow panel will be used for the drip die, so I want it to look like honey dripping. Blending smoothly is easy with this brush on watercolor paper, but it does not have to be perfectly smooth. It actually looks nice when the honey is not evenly colored everywhere. You do not need to color a full card panel, because I will only die cut a part of the paper and the rest will not be used. Now that I have added enough ink to the paper, I want to create some darker spots. For that I press some ink onto my work mat. Then I spray a very small amount of water over it to dilute the ink and let it react with the water. Next I take a plastic sandwich bag and place 2 small pieces of paper towel inside. I push them into one corner of the bag and twist the end closed. You can also tie a knot in it. Then I dip it into the ink on my work mat and press it onto the paper. Keep dipping and stamping. This creates beautiful marbled spots. I've shown this technique in a previous video. I will add a link to it in the description. If the ink becomes too dry, you can add a tiny bit more water. Next we take a new piece of watercolor paper and color it blue using Peacock Feathers Distress Oxide. This panel will be colored very lightly. I intentionally leave the edges lighter than the center. I also leave the top part white, because the drip will be placed over it later, so no color is needed there. Here as well I want to add a little texture in the distress ink, so I lightly spray some water droplets over the panel. You do not have to do this, but I like the effect. I dab the droplets dry with a piece of paper towel. And where I dab, you can see lighter spots appear. The 2 panels are still quite wet, so before die cutting them, I dry them with the heat tool. The drip die fits perfectly across the width of an A6 card. I place it quite high, because I want to see the full dotted heart pattern underneath the drip. Even though I will die cut that heart from the blue cardstock later, this way I can already see where to place it best. I choose to cut the drip slightly lower, so I have some room to adjust. The excess at the top can always be trimmed off later. The leftover piece is also fun to use, for example to create a window effect by placing part of it on the top and part on the bottom. But I now use it to die cut some more small drips. I'm now going to stamp, heat emboss and color this fun bee using 3 Distress Oxide colors. These are the same colors I use throughout the whole card. Enjoy the coloring process, and after that, watch the rest of the card come together. Now that we've created the background, the bee and the honey drip, we can figure out where to stamp and die cut. For the text, Bee Queen will go at the top and Keep Calm and Buzz On will go at the bottom. So I need to carefully decide where to die cut the heart. I want to leave enough space for both the bee and the text, and I want the dots to line up perfectly behind the bee. When die cutting small shapes, especially small holes, the pieces often stay stuck in your cutting plate, or sometimes in the die itself. Here is a helpful tip. Use your top plate and slide it firmly over the cutting plate. This way you can easily brush off all the stuck pieces. I will show it once more. And in this case, those small circles are great to use as shaker elements. To make the background panel a bit more playful, I'm going to use the flower stencil. I place it diagonally on the panel. Using the same ink color as the background, which is peacock feathers, I color a few of the flowers. I shift the stencil slightly so that one of the flowers sits partly inside the die cut heart. I do not color all the flowers, just a few, so it does not become too busy. When I removed the stencil, I noticed I was a bit careless while coloring. I worked a bit too fast and went over the edges on 2 flowers. Coloring part of the flower next to it, I should have masked off the surrounding flowers or used a smaller brush for coloring. Because the background already has some texture, I try to gently dab away those unwanted areas with a slightly damp piece of paper towel. It does not remove everything, but it already makes a big difference. After drying the paper with the heat tool and adding a bit more color, it is almost invisible. A few extra water splatters and everything blends together again. Stamping text straight is always a bit tricky. The new stamps are quite sticky, which is great because they stay in place on the clear block and on the packaging. But when they are brand new, they also stick to your fingers. I usually place them along the lines on my work mat and then pick them up with the clear block. If the lines on the clear block match the text, it usually works out fine. In this case, I stamped the text a bit crooked. If you look closely, you see that I didn't check the position of the paper and the lines on the work mat properly. I will still use this strip and place it slightly at an angle so the text looks straighter. I add clear embossing powder on the wet ink and melt it with the heat tool so the text will become glossy and nice. Next I stamp the other text. Keep calm and buzz on. There are great combinations you can make. I also really like the text Not Feeling So Fly for a get well card together with that funny fly. Before stamping the sentiment, I add some powder from the embossing pouch to prepare the paper. As always, I stamp it first a fine onyx black ink because it gives a crisp result every time. I also heat emboss the text to make it glossy and stand out nicely. Now it is time to assemble the card. I take a white card base, a folded A6 size card made from white DCP paper. In the center I add a bit of orange Distress Oxide ink. It is the same color I used for coloring the bee. I do this because the die cut heart has openings and that color will show through underneath. The blending does not need to be perfect. It looks nice when you can see a soft blend from orange to yellow. So I also add a bit of yellow ink. I tested different backgrounds beforehand, like black or blue, but the yellow made the most sense to me. Before assembling everything, I take an action wobbler and place it behind the bee, so it can move. I cut the wobbler myself, using the action die from the garden collection from CarlaCreates, and some acetate. You can find tips for cutting it in my short or reel, the link is in the description. If I place the wobbler diagonally, it fits nicely behind the bee and stays hidden. I do not use the matching square for placement, so I estimate where to cut to thread the wobbler through the panel. For cutting, I use the other side of the work mat. I will twist the wobbler 4 times through the card panel, so I need to make a small slit just next to the start of the spiral to insert it. There we go. I thread the wobbler through 1, 2, 3 and 4 times. Now it sits in place. I add tape on the back to secure the wobbler. I make sure the tape does not cover the holes, because that would show through and look shiny, so I trim that away. You can also trim a corner of the wobbler. As long as you do not cut it completely, it will still work. The best way to attach the image to the wobbler is by using a glue dot. They are very sticky. I use a pickup tool to place the glue dot in the center of the wobbler. Once the image is attached, you can gently pull on it and stretch the plastic a bit to create more movement. I need to trim the drip slightly because I stamped the text a little crooked, but luckily that is easy to fix. I glue the drip flat onto the card, but you could also layer multiple die cuts for more dimension. I also glue the 2 small drips. Make sure you place them directly under a drip, not under a gap, because the drop should fall straight down and look like they fall from another drip. Now I attach the card panel to the folded card base using double-sided tape. Looking at it now, I feel it still needs a bit more contrast or shadow. Do you recognize that feeling when your card seems finished but you still want to add something? I decide to darken the flower on the left and add a few more at the bottom. It is always nice when part of a stencil design runs off the edge of the paper. I have cleaned my work mat and flipped the plate back over. And now I am going to add some dots using a Fudenosuke brush pen. Groups of 3 always create a nice balance. Because I miss some shadows and contrast in the drip, I add black curved lines and I add them on every drip and always in the same position of each drip. To make the holes in the heart stand out more, I also add small black lines to the edge of each hole. Again, always in the same position. I could have created the same effect by die cutting a heart from black paper and placing it slightly offset behind the other heart. I could also have done the same with the drip die, but I had already glued everything down before I thought of that. Adding white highlights to the drips will make them look more rounded and gives a shiny effect. You can do this with a white Posca marker or with a white gel pen, or even with white ink and a brush. I also add a small white line inside the little holes, exactly on the opposite side of the black lines. I add a few extra white dots next to the black dots and also a small highlight in the flowers. It turned out to be a fun card, although afterwards I might have added more layers of paper, but those black lines also create depth. The wobbler is always fun to use for many different images. Stay tuned because I'm going to make another card with the same Bloom and Zoom collection, and this one is completely different. For the second card I will be using the Dutch board punts in combination with the fly stamp, on which is the poop stamp, and I will turn it into whipped cream. There's also a matching die, and I will show you a creative way to use that one. The texts are specifically for Dutch users and have hilarious word puns. Let them a poopy smelling means something as give them a taste of their own medicine. Vlieg je dromen achterna means follow your dreams. There's also weer een jaartje ouder, de tijd vliegt. Another year older, time flies. Probably these puns are only funny for the Dutch, but don't let that stop you from watching this part of the video, because I'm going to share some more helpful tips with you. I place the elements on the card so I can see where I want to position the poop dies. An arrangement of 3 is always a good choice. I am die cutting directly into the card panel. This way we create an inlay die effect. This means you place the die cut back into its original shape, which creates a nice dimensional background without adding too much bulk to the card. Keep in mind that the shapes are divided evenly and feel more or less balanced. That is why I have the top 2 pointing outwards and the bottom one I cut facing inward. I also position this one slightly more toward the center and not directly below the top ones. When die cutting, I cut halfway through the panel and then go back to avoid damaging the embossing or the paper. From a new piece of white paper I cut 3 poop die cuts, which I color the same way as the large poop stamp. I can place them into the die cut openings in the panel. Watch my tip to easily fit them into the card. I applied a layer of Nouveau Aqua Shimmer to the whipped cream and the wings of the fly for a subtle shimmer. The text strip felt a bit off to me, so I made a new one that fits the full width of the card. I used 3D foam to adhere it to the card and a T-ruler to position it straight. I hope you enjoyed watching and that you learned something new. You can find all product links and more information in the description below the video. Some of these are affiliate links, which means you support my channel at no extra cost to you. If you don't want to miss my new videos, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. Follow me on my socials for more inspiration. Thanks for watching and I will see you next Monday. Bye bye!